Hey everybody, Matt Gurney here at the Line Podcast on June 14th, 2024. Lots to talk about this week, and you will not be shocked to know we're going to lead with the foreign interference file. We're also going to talk about a really weird photograph and why we could probably write whole essays about it, and we might. A couple other just quick little stories from cities and provinces as well, plus something we haven't read yet, but we're going to. All that and more on the latest episode of the Line Podcast. This episode of the Line Podcast has been brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Canada can be a global leader in reducing the harm caused by smoking, but it requires actionable steps, including giving adult smokers the information they need to choose potentially less harmful alternatives. Learn more at Unsmoke.ca. Well, astute viewers, listeners may not have noticed this yet, but astute viewers will know that Jen is not in her usual place. So, Jen, you're at a family cottage or something? You're out of town for
Yeah,
a few days. Have you fled the city for water?
I haven't fled the city for more water, let's put it that way. So, you wouldn't hold it against me, though, now would you? Just be like, screw it, I need a shower, I need a bath. No, I mean, actually, it's kind of funny. The last couple of weeks, I feel like I've been in an unusual place more than often than I've been in a usual place. I seem to be recording this podcast from all over the continent. But no, this is a long scheduled family reunion of sorts. We're on the, where is it? Gulf Islands. Gulf Islands, yes. Yes, that's where we are. This is a place
On the Pacific.
on the Pacific, yes. So we've been coming back to this particular island off and on for many, 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 many years. We have rented a little cottage. I am within walking distance of the ocean, the sweet, warm, and healing embrace of Mother Ocean. And as you can see, my background is like fantastically green and wet, so not something I'm entirely used to in Calgary. So it's been lovely, been great. But just so our podcast listeners know, two things. One, I am in a remote location where I think the Wi-Fi has been crapping in and out. Wi-Fi access in all remote locations in Canada is not perfection. And secondly, for some reason, my typical microphone has just died on me. Well, I mean, to be fair, I have been shoving it in an overhead quite a lot over the last few weeks. So it's, who knows if that's the wire's dead or the microphone itself is dead, but I think I may have killed it. So I'm now trying to do this podcast based on a little headset. So if the audio quality is not perfect, that's my fault. So I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, and also to the all the readers, it was a slow week in print at the Line. Jen and I had a fantastic week, but I was out of town for family reasons on some of the stuff. I had some family stuff I had to deal with. Jen is technically you're on vacation, but we're keeping the podcast going. Jen's actually on vacation this week and next week, so things were a bit slower than usual at the Line. But don't worry, we got a lot of content coming in. It'll be hopefully a more normal week next week. And we'll figure out a summer publication schedule because I can tell you the incoming freelance pieces are slowing down. Like we're
Yeah,
getting that
yeah,
time
yeah.
of year where things start to slow down. So
Well, also
Jen and I will keep
people
the
don't
shop open over the summer, but it'll be slow because summers are slow.
summer's, and also nobody wants like 5 pieces a week during the midst of summer when nothing's happening, man. So it's like we're not gonna inundate your web your inboxes with stuff if in July and August. That's not fair. So there you go. We'll still be around. We'll still be writing. We'll still be taking stuff on as needs do. But yeah, we're going to be heading into summer schedule pretty quick. And considering how fast silly season has arrived, I think we're more or less on summer schedule now at this point.
I want to get into serious conversation about foreign interference stuff, but I actually just want to put a pin in that briefly. It's the most important topic of the week, but it'll probably be tonally the second topic we do on the podcast. What was the latest in Calgary when you guys left? Because I have a story I want to tell you guys, you and the listeners. But when you actually got out of Calgary to head for the coast, what were you guys able to shower? Like, what was the status on
Yeah.
that?
So I don't know if I quite want to do a victory lap because it does feel a little bit gauche. But you may recall, I don't know if we talked about this last week, but I did this tweet thread trying to help for once, rather than just being a snarky asshole, just trying to help and say, look, the city is struggling to communicate what is going on. Here is my quick little, 9-point recommendation for how they can address the communications problem and communicate this a little bit better. And to my delight and surprise, like literally the next day, the city apologized for its poor communications and rolled out a new communications plan that more or less followed my recommendations. So I think somebody up there was paying attention. So great. And I don't want to be a jerk about it, because I think that when people recognize that there's been a problem and make good faith efforts to improve the problem, I'm like, thank you. Appreciate that. Well done. Like, that to me, that's responsiveness. That's good. If somebody makes mistakes, that's human, but trying to correct mistakes is hard, and I think it's worth applauding when people make correct mistakes. But anyway, they had, I think, really quickly and radically improved their communications to better explain exactly why this big water main break was damaging the entire city's potable water supply. And they, I think, did a much better job explaining what specific water restrictions were required of us. So what it was this water main break was feeding into, I think, the Bears Paw Dam water treatment center, and from that water treatment center, that filled something like 23 reservoirs that were located around the city. So with that particular water main break out of contention, the city had to rely on other water treatment centers in order to feed the city's capacity. And it was something like our capacity was down to like 600 million liters of water per day, which was, I think, a 40%, don't quote me on this, 40% reduction in the normal amount. So Calgarians needed to sort of reduce their water intake or their water consumption by about that much. So what that actually meant was, yes, we could bathe, but it was like, keep your showers to 5 to 10 minutes tops, kind of thing. Yes, you can. Basically, the way it was described is essentially use cabin rules. So, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down.
Yeah.
People who go to cabins will be familiar with these sort of water restriction, water saving rules. I mean, I was doing my dishes by hand. I wasn't running the dishwasher. We did have to do a couple loads of laundry because we were traveling, but like, I tried to put off the load of laundry for one day, and then I did everything in as few loads as possible. And yeah, I was just putting off the shower for an extra day or so, so it wasn't like, oh yeah, you certainly couldn't water your plants. Everybody's plants are dying. So yeah, it's not like it was Mad Max reality, or nobody's like gonna die of thirst. There's water coming out of the taps. It was just, try and obey essentially Canadian cabin rules, for a couple of days and potentially a couple of weeks.
It was, so while you were talking there, Jen, YouTube viewers will have seen me looking off screen. No disrespect intended. I actually pulled up the latest update from Calgary.
Mm-hmm.
So you're on vacation now. I don't even know if you know this, but some of the repair workers were injured at the site, and they
I
had to
didn't know that.
suspend all repair efforts. And I don't
Wow.
know if they've restarted them yet.
Wow. Okay.
And as of this morning's update, so we're recording this Friday. It's about 1 o'clock Eastern time, so late morning Calgary time. The Gondak is basically saying we're using more water than we can provide. Everybody stop it. So kind of human nature, right? Everybody's really good for like the first day, but then the next day they're like, well, I stink, or my dishes are dirty, and people start bending the rules. So Gondek's reading the Riot Act. I think the repair timeline on this thing has been pushed backward.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't say this to mock at all, rather the opposite. A couple of months ago, the big story in Alberta, including Calgary, but Alberta generally, was drought. And then it was torrential rains causing flood dangers. And now Calgary's out of water.
Yeah.
So this is not, basically, wherever you are, just stay there.
Yeah. Well, actually, kind of, you're laughing, but one of the things that we've considered is potentially not going back home to Calgary, but maybe spending some time with my parents for a week or two until the water situation is fixed. If it continues to be a problem, then that's something you may find me next week in a new exotic location somewhere in British Columbia. So there you go.
Yeah. I don't say this to mock. I mean this very seriously. Before we started the podcast today, my daughter is old enough now that she has her own phone, and I finished my radio show in the morning, and I was doing a few household errands before you and I started podcasting, and my daughter texts me from school, which probably shouldn't be doing, but it's lunch hour, so I guess she has her phone out, and she says, "Dad, what's with all the smoke?" And I went, oh, and I went outside and I looked up, and there was a huge plume of smoke going over my neighborhood. And I kind of walked around. I talked to the neighbors, figured out it's an industrial area nearby. There's about a bajillion fire trucks and police cars racing by. So I was just gabbing with the neighbors. And I come back in the house. And I remember that one of the last things I had done before my daughter called me was I turned the shower on, because we have like one of the tankless water heaters, and it takes 30 to 45 seconds to get, sometimes as long as a minute, for the water to get hot. So what I kind of do, is my habit, is I turn on the shower. I do a couple of quick things. I make a bed. I put some laundry in the closet, and then I hop in the shower once it's hot. But I had left the house, talked to neighbors, took a walk around. I just left my shower running for like 20 minutes. And I don't care. Toronto has no water problems, but it just kind of occurred to me, Canadians are so spoiled for water. Like in most parts of the world and most parts of human history, leaving a shower running for 20 minutes would be like a crime against humanity.
Yeah.
Didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, look, hopefully things improve in Calgary. Hopefully Leaside doesn't burn down, because it seems to be some industrial area.
And also,
that's
like, my
on
hearts
fire.
go out to the workers who are injured. You're right, I didn't know that because I haven't been following the local news in the last 2 or 3 days. So, yeah, my hearts go out to them.
You're on
that's
vacation. It's allowed.
It's allowed. Is it allowed?
I think
Is
they're
it permitted?
okay, but they shut it down.
Okay. Yikes. Okay. Well, I mean, last
Well, look,
night
we're gonna get into.
they were looking at 5 to 7 days repair. So if they're pushing that back, we're now looking into a now weeks long problem. So that's not great. It's not great, Bob.
Enjoy the Pacific.
Yeah.
Look, we'll come back. We'll talk. We'll talk actual serious stuff in a minute. But obviously, shout out to everybody in Calgary, and especially those injured workers and the firefighters currently in Toronto trying to stop my neighborhood from burning down. Everything's fine. Like and subscribe. This episode of the Line Podcast has been brought to you by Unsmoke Canada, which is dedicated to helping Canadians who are looking to quit smoking understand the full range of options available. Despite decades of government programs and regulations, today nearly 5 million Canadian adults smoke cigarettes. Adult smokers who choose to continue to smoke should be aware that other options exist. Right now, accessing information about these options is heavily restricted in Canada. While not risk-free, alternatives such as heated tobacco and vaping products provide a potentially less harmful choice than cigarettes. Cigarettes burn tobacco, resulting in smoke that contains 6,000 harmful chemicals that are associated with smoking-related disease and death. Heated tobacco and vaping products have the potential to significantly reduce this risk. Health agencies around the world are now considering these alternatives to help end smoking. Updated laws can help adult smokers better understand the full range of options available, including the relative risks of these products. Millions of Canadians smoke cigarettes. Technology exists that can help change that, but policymakers need to take actions. Learn more about how a smoke-free future can be achieved at Unsmoke.ca. Well, hello, viewers and readers of the line, and listeners, of course.
You're about to get real disappointed. Yeah, you're about to get real disappointed.
Jen being in the remote area, the internet has totally conked out on her, and we've tried every technical thing we can think of. So what we've done is we've switched to our backup plan, guys. I am still broadcasting normally. Jen's now dialed in by phone. We obviously apologize for this. We acknowledge that this is suboptimal, but we hope you love the content enough to be satisfied with our somewhat cobbled together tech arrangement. So Jen, let me put this question to you. Were you on vacation before Elizabeth May and Jagmeet Singh made their dueling banjo statements in the House of Commons this week? Did you actually see what happened on that front?
I did not see what happened. I read about it afterwards.
So we've been talking since last week about the NSICOP report, and Elizabeth May did something really interesting this week. She came out and she said, I have read the unredacted report. I have looked at it, and there is no there. There is nothing to be worried about. I am totally comfortable being in the House with everyone. And my read on that, and this aligned with some of what I'd already learned on my own, was that Elizabeth May was nudging people's attention towards the Senate, saying if there are problems with parliamentarians and not with members, then it's senators. That was my interpretation of what she had said. And again, that aligned with what I'd already been told. But then Mr. Singh, the NDP leader on Thursday, he comes out and says, I read the exact same report, and I'm really worried. I am worried about this. Jen, it seems to me we've put ourselves as a country into a situation where we don't even know if we have traitors or not because our politicians can't even agree on that much. Prime Minister ain't
Well, and
talking.
also,
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say the other problem is that because of the conditions under which both Singh and May read the Unsmoke report, they can't release names. Like they've agreed not to reveal names that they shouldn't be revealing. So they're choosing to read the Unsmoke report has paradoxically bound them into a position of non-transparency. So like Canadians can't even decide for themselves whether or not Singh or May is giving the more accurate read of the report, because of course we've set up this hilarious and completely ridiculous situation where we can't actually name the people who are named.
I wrote a column for us on sorry, now my dog's howling. We needed to screw up this podcast as much as possible. I wrote a column for us this week, and the column, Jen, started off of a cloud document I was writing for us both. And I thought it would be useful, because the story just keeps going on and on and on forever, to have a document where we would note a chronology and relevant links to the articles. I just thought it would be useful for us to have. And as I was reading it, I had to go back and I had to probably read 20 or 30 articles kind of from when this all began in fall of 2022 right up until this week. And one of the things that drove me nuts when I was reading it was how in almost every one of those articles, there is some statement from the government that is downplaying the problem or attacking the evidence or saying it's racism. And we're in a situation, Jen, and you just said it exactly right. We have to take the government's word for it. We have to take the parliamentarians' word for it. There's no other mechanism that you and I can do this. It would be so much easier to take the government's word for it if they had put the slightest effort into taking this issue seriously since it began.
Yeah, that would make it a lot easier to give anyone the benefit of the doubt here. But I think, which we established last week, the government simply doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. Now, I do think it's interesting because I do think that it's possible to read Elizabeth May and Jagmeet Singh's positions not antagonistically. It's possible that, for example, Jagmeet Singh read the report, says, yes, there's an overall global problem and I'm concerned. And as you notice, it's possible that Elizabeth May read the report and said specifically, I am not concerned about fellow sitting MPs, right? Like these two positions aren't mutually contradictory necessarily. But like, look, we're just in this impossible situation because of this country's absolute allergy to transparency and openness. A reasonable person can't look at these two statements and come to a reasonable position based on the evidence presented to us.
What we need to have happen,
you know what I mean? What we need to have happen is the names need to be named. I think I go back to exactly what we said about this last week. It doesn't screw up anyone's due process to have them kicked out of a caucus or asked to leave their position of authority pending an investigation. That is not an unreasonable request given the gravity of some of the allegations that are being alleged here. And like I'm a little bit more sympathetic to somebody who might have, quote unquote, unwittingly provided intelligence or aid to. I can understand why people can be reasonably intelligent, people can be duped. But some of the specific allegations that are being put forward here through this report is like, person knowingly gave information counter to Canadian interests to a known foreign agent. Like, person received actual financial aid from known foreign agent or proxies. These are not gray line areas where like a person might be duped. This is knowing behavior. The fact that this farce has been allowed to continue as long as it has, and nobody's been name shamed and kicked out of some kind of caucus or position of authority, is baffling to me. Just completely unacceptable.
The only way I can read it, and it's the only way I do read it, is that from the Liberal perspective, they have decided that they think they can ride this out politically, and they can keep kind of making little tactical withdrawals or concessions, and they can ride this out. And I don't know if that's because they have compromised members and individuals, or if because they just don't want to deal with it, or if they're actually relatively blameless, but they think they're going to look like they've been incompetent. There's a lot of possible explanations for this, or some combination thereof, and I don't presume to know which one it is. And for the Conservatives, they're in a very similar situation, because maybe the reason the Conservatives are being cautious about this is because they're also implicated. Maybe the reason is because they've made a partisan political calculation that any day spent talking about anything other than the carbon tax and cost of living is a wasted political day for them. I don't know. I really genuinely don't know. But I do know that they're both starting, like, both meaning the parties, they both look like idiots. And like, I think it's harder to reconcile the Singh statement and the May statement than you do. I think Singh went out further than May was willing to. But the one thing I will agree they have in common is that both of them this week, I think, made an honest and sincere effort to do the best they can within the constraints of our stupid system. I'm not even seeing that from the Liberals or the Conservatives here. The stupidity of the system to them is not a bug, it's a feature.
Okay, so here's my theory here. This is my dark theory, is that the thing motivating the Liberals and the Conservatives is fundamentally the same. Not that they respectively think their caucuses are irredeemably compromised by foreign agents, although there have to be some of those actors kicking around, but rather both of them simply think that the majority of Canadians don't care about this. And they actually have prioritized their daily polling numbers and their daily sort of interests above the long-term credibility of the institutions they serve.
I think that's it. I know it's plausible, Jen. I mean, it's also possible
which is
we can mix and
a
match
damning statement on
one or the other.
Well, but also that's a damning statement, not just of the politicians, but of us. Like, that's a damning statement right across the board.
It really is. Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah, like that's actually the most depressing read if you start to think about it.
I've always
like this isn't like this is a nerd issue. People like you and me give a shit about this, but like normal people don't care. Normal people don't give a shit.
I was interviewed by Rob Breckenridge back in your hometown about my column on Friday, and I said much the same, Jen. I said we're kind of in a situation where, you know, that we've talked about that the meme before. Are we the baddies? We're not the baddies, but we're the nerds. We're the exceptions. We're the people who actually give a shit about this. Like, I am outraged that the major parties are not prepared to take national security seriously, but I know I'm outnumbered 1,000 to 1 by people who just want the carbon tax cut.
But here's the thing that pisses me off about this, and this is why I get concerned about the Liberals' existing governance and also the Conservatives' capacity to govern, is that, yes, I understand that sometimes there are niche issues that ordinary Canadians don't understand or care about. That doesn't mean they're not important. Sometimes the nerds are losing it for a good reason. Yeah, maybe Canadians don't care about it today or in a short-term way right now, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have long-term resonance and long-term consequences to institutional stability and institutional trust. And that's kind of where I would make the argument on this. It's like, yeah, I understand that, you know, nobody cares about this and your polling numbers might blip for a day or two if you actually try to root this out of your own caucus or address it head on in a serious adult way. Like, I get that there might be some very short-term polling consequence for you for doing that. But the long-term failure to do that is the continued erosion of institutional trust and credibility for the very institutions that you either serve or wish to serve. That's worse. That's the worst option. You're choosing the worst one. It's like you're all failing the goddamn marshmallow test, all of you.
I feel like we're all on a ship and there are two officers fighting to be captain of the ship, and they both have a lot of the crew that's gone with them, but the ship is falling apart and sinking because no one is spending any time taking care of the ship. They're just too busy fighting about who gets to be captain.
And also, can I just say that this is something that really depresses me, is what a lost opportunity this is for the Conservatives.
I know.
Like, there's an opportunity here for the Conservatives to demonstrate we're the adults in the room. We understand it's an issue that Canadians don't care about, but we're going to demonstrate some leadership by explaining why we think Canadians should care about it. And we're going to sacrifice, for a very short amount of time, a little bit of narrative momentum and expend a little bit of political capital focusing on this issue and demonstrating that how an adult would handle this issue, because we're adults and we would like to show people that we're the adults. Like, they could take that kind of a picture on it, but they're not, so they won't. Moving on.
You know what? One other thing before we do the like and subscribe break, I do find it interesting that we're continuing. So yeah, look, you and I are on the same page on this one. Like I wrote my whole column about it. I don't have anything else to say about the foreign interference front. But I do find it interesting that we keep getting reports about the media being compromised. And I'm not shocked by that. You and I have always been very clear with the fact that we think foreign interference is very broad and deep in Canadian society. So that would include targeting academia, security services, business. You and I have talked about the comms and GR and PR world, but we also think there's been targeting of the media. To state the obvious, I have never knowingly participated in any of this stuff, but I don't always know who people are when they approach me with a pitch or ask for a meeting. I don't know if I'm approached by a Canadian that I do know who's working at one of the comms or GR or PR firms. I don't always know who their client is when they pitch me on an article. Now, I think I've tried to be careful over the years, and I'm not grotesquely naive, but I do not know who everyone I've had a meeting with is fundamentally representing. So to state the obvious, you and I have never taken the big suitcases full of Chinese or Russian cash. Not that the Russian cash would be worth much these days, but we haven't. But I'm going to be willing to bet that there are Canadian journalists, potentially including you and I don't think so, but it's possible, who will be named in this report or would have been indicated in this report, and they're not going to have any idea.
Yeah, I think we need to be careful about not necessarily, there's a difference between witting and unwitting, right? Yeah. Like, people can be fooled. Absolutely. I would be pretty doubtful that our names were in this report, to be honest with you, Matt. When we're talking about sort of Chinese or foreign interference in the Canadian media, to me, these suspects are real obvious. Not to get ourselves into trouble by naming names, but like, you know what I mean? But I don't think that we need to go full Where's Waldo on that one. I don't think that you're going to find any names that would surprise you, and I highly doubt that our names would be even on the unwitting side. I just don't think we're good, smart targets for that kind of thing. But anyway, that's just my opinion. Who knows? You're right. I'm perfectly happy to be just like, yeah, it's possible that some assholes approached us that we didn't know was being funded by X or Y. I mean, anything like that's possible, but I don't know, Matt. I doubt it. I kind of doubt it.
Do you have any idea how many op-eds I would have reviewed in my tenure as National Post comment editor?
Oh, yeah. Sure. Fair enough. I'm like, hey, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know where 90% of them came from other than the name on the email. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Some of the NSICOP allegations are that companies were paid for stories or paid to remove stories. That I don't know about. I honestly don't. But, if China, for instance, wanted to commission a ton of op-eds against Canadian military spending, okay, they're probably not going to send it to me when I was at the National Post. They'd send those other places. But they could have backed a dozen academics or researchers to go write those op-eds, and they could have done it through a proxy so that even the people taking the checks might not have known where they were coming from.
Well, can I just say, like, all of this is just more argument for transparency. Like, if somebody's targeted me for foreign interference, or you, or anybody we've worked with, and again, not assuming guilt here, I'm assuming unwittingly, unknowingly, I want to know. If I've been targeted for this, I want to know. Like, don't leave me hanging. Tell me, man. Like, I don't want to have been like an unwitting dupe of somebody and to be therefore unaware of being a target of that. In fact, I think you kind of have a responsibility to tell me if I have been. Like, because that's the last thing I would want for myself. So I said, this is just another argument for the absurdity of the secrecy here.
I agree with you completely, but we have to remember that even there might be. who are being directly targeted were not getting briefed on this. What are the odds you and I are going to get briefed?
No, exactly. But I mean, this is why I'm thinking all of it should just come out. Just release the whole report. But anyway, I mean, to the extent that you can without compromising intelligence sources, I understand that. But in fact, that's the only argument that I would recognize as being legitimate here. But like, you can release names without releasing the sources of those names, provided they're properly vetted. I mean, I think you've mentioned this in your column, but NSCOP was not a bunch of people off the street who had no intelligence background or briefing. These were people who are highly trained, highly credible, with good experience and good track records in dealing with these issues.
That was Mitch earlier in the week. Yep, and he pointed out that like NSCOP's a bunch of lawyers, cops, and former military personnel, people who know how to look at evidence and assess threats. Yeah,
and we're not giving NSCOP the power to sort of jail people or charge people without further investigation. That's not the purpose of the committee. But if they put a name in that report, they put a name in that report for good reason. I think I have enough trust in NSCOP to trust that. So, like I said, it's just again the arguments for transparency and revelation just compound on one another.
The only thing I'm going to add before we wrap up this segment is that when you were talking about which suspects in the Canadian media you would be suspicious of, somewhere at that exact moment, our lawyers all had like a shudder go down their spines, and they'll never know why.
A disturbance in the legal force was felt.
Like and subscribe. We're gonna try, folks, to reconnect and see if we can get Jen back on video. But in any case, we hope you enjoyed this cobbled together segment. Well, ladies, gentlemen of the line, things are going great.
Everything keeps on getting worse. The longer I'm on the phone, the more telecommunications personally deprived of me.
So I was joking in the last segment.
I'm taking it personally, man.
I joked in the last segment that like our lawyers felt like chills down their spine when you started talking about which media companies might be involved in foreign interference. Maybe the lawyers are like just like following you on vacation and slowly disconnecting all your means of telecommunication.
That's high levels of commitment, and also really working against their incentive structures. I'm just going to point out.
Oh, they'll bill you for every hour they spent doing it.
Oh, well, that also makes sense. I am the kind of the client that lawyers really like. So there you go.
So what has happened is that we were able to start off doing this as a video, but then we lost the ability to do that. And then we were able to switch to me being on video and Jen being phoned in. And then we lost the ability to do that. And then we switched to Jen phoning in, not using a normal phone, but using a telephone app that we use sometimes. And that worked for about 12 seconds. And then we lost the ability to do that. So now Jen has taken her husband's phone. And that is how we have established just enough of a connection to do this. So Jen, before the telecom
also to confirm that I'm still breathing and I'm not dead. So there you go.
Yeah, this is proof of life. Okay, Jen, let's not tempt fate further. Let's just jump right into it. And look, folks, Jen and I have adopted the attitude of we're just going to laugh this one off. We're going to find a way to do this better next week, but like, we're not going to worry about it. Jen's on vacation. I got a weekend coming up. It is what it is. We appreciate your forbearance. The tech gods are against us, guys. So we're just doing our best. Jen, tell me, why are the politics gods against Mark Carney watching hockey?
They're not against Mark Carney watching hockey. They are laughing with cringe and anticipation when they see pictures of Mark Carney wearing an Oilers jersey to watch the game and holding what appears to be an unopened Budweiser in order to look relatable. I mean, there's only one way to respond to a self-conscious image that egregious, and that is to say to our dear sirs and gentlemen and ladies, he's running. He's absolutely running. There is no way Mark Carney would have based himself with a Budweiser if he were not running.
I know this is going to sound petty of me, and I know this might be possibly forestalling future sponsorship opportunities. I will not vote for a man who chooses to pose with a Budweiser.
Tell me why. Explain.
Just a bad beer. And like Budweiser, I find is probably the most drinkable of the bad beers. So to the company that owns Budweiser, like you can take that from what you want. But like when you go into kind of like any dive bar anywhere in North America, Budweiser or Coors will be the American option. And in Canada, you'll also have Molson or Labatt Blue. I don't
I
drink
also say
any of
it's
these
just
by choice.
okay, but it's also okay. The choice is obviously contrived, right? Like nobody actually thinks that Mark Carney is drinking Bud. Secondly, there is a weird sort of, I think, nod to the Bud Light controversy with the Dylan Mulvaney stuff.
Yep.
He's posing in front of, he's holding a normal Bud, but he's posing in front of a Bud Light sign in a picture that is otherwise totally and utterly contrived from top to bottom. I don't think that can be totally a coincidence. For people who aren't aware, there was a big culture war issue when sort of trans influencer by the name of Dylan Mulvaney did a Bud Light ad, which caused a lot of people on the right to essentially start boycotting Bud Light.
I don't think their market shares recovered yet.
I don't think it has. So it was a weird choice for them to wade into the culture wars in this particular way. But, the reaction is, everything about it is kind of silly, and I don't want to get into it. But anyway, I don't think it's a total coincidence that there's a Bud Light picture in this. But that being said, I mean, if Mark Carney is going to drink a beer and it were to come across as non-contrived, he probably would be drinking some weird, local brewery beer that was $40 and was handcrafted from the tears of local virgins. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it would be one of those types of beers.
It's my kind of beer.
Of course, he's not going to pose with that kind of beer because that would be too telling of who he is as a human being. So instead they're going with this weird Bud Light beer in order to try and make him seem more relatable, but it doesn't, because it doesn't ring true to who he is. It's very inauthentic. It's very cringy. So I don't know. I think that everything about why Mark Carney is going to run and lose can be summed up in this one single political image. It's quite astonishing to watch. I think he is going to really, really struggle to try and craft a relatable everyman vibe. And I don't know personally, I mean, if I were advising Mark Carney, I'd be like, you can't. It's not you. You shouldn't do that. You're a patrician elite who's worked at the head of two, central banks of major G7 countries. There is no way to make that relatable. You have to lean in on that and lean in on it hard and just ask people to accept you for who and what you are. But instead, what we're going to get is some kind of weird attempt to run on Mark Carney's credentials and also his unrelatable, or should I say this, relatability. And I don't think it's going to work.
So a couple things to say in response to that. One, while you were talking, as YouTube viewers will see, I did pull a chart. It's on my phone. The parent company of Bud Light have stabilized their revenues, but volume sales of Bud Light are still falling. So more than a year after the controversy, they're still losing market share. Okay, so that's okay. Can take that for what it's worth. Actually, substantially commenting on the Mark Carney photo, I want to tell you, this is going to turn into.
And I'm really hoping we're pulling up a picture of the Mark Carney video instead of my non-existent black rectangle face.
Oh, don't worry. We will have a succession of photos for this segment. I want to make a light comment that will lead into a serious political comment. I go to a lot of hockey games, and I mean like professional ones. I'm in a hockey rink like 3 or 4 times a week because of my son, but I also go to a lot of Leaf games. And one of the things I've observed over the year, and it just amuses me, is that what you always see are men and women at the game together, couples out at a game, and the dude is always wearing a completely current Maple Leaf jersey. It is the current style, the current logos, the name of a current player. The woman is always wearing one that is 5 or 10 years out of date, because the chicks don't care. They don't like, most of them, exceptions aside. I'm not saying that there's no big hockey fans who are women, but you can tell that what happens is that the dude has spent money on himself to get himself the premier up-to-date Leaf jersey, and his wife or girlfriend or partner, whoever he's there with, she's wearing his last one. And this is something I noticed like 10 years ago. So when I see an actual Like when I see women at a Leaf game who are wearing up-to-date jerseys, I'm like, that's a Leaf fan. That is a woman who
Mhm.
loves the Maple Leafs and is here to support the team. When I see a man and a woman and the dude's in like an Austin Matthews jersey and the woman's got like a Wendell Clark from 1992 jersey, I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, she is wearing a jersey just to fit in. My wife had commented on that because I took her to some games and she's like, oh, why doesn't my jersey have a name on the back of it? And why is the logo different? And I realized, oh, I'm giving her my old jersey. So I got her a current jersey this year. So the next time we go to a game together, she's going to be just as current as I am. The reason I bring
That's
this
love,
up,
Matt. Love.
that is love. Yeah, that's my love language. The reason I bring this up, and I promised this would turn into a serious political point, what I love about this is that you've got Mark Carney like slumming it with like the locals with a bud wearing a pristine Oilers jersey.
But
People who
but
show
by
up
your
at
metric doesn't,
people who show up
by your
at
metric,
like
yeah,
county
okay.
fairs to drink a bud and talk hockey are wearing jerseys that are 10 years out of date.
So what's your implication? Because I mean, if I'm reading your logic right, the fact that he's wearing a new Oilers jersey would indicate that he cares about. Sorry, a new Oilers jersey would indicate that he cares deeply about the team.
So I'm actually just scrolling through Oilers jersey options now. Let's see. I
Are
just
we doing
went
like
on the
deep political
NHL shop.
analysis based on merch, based on like hockey merch? Because that might be the most Canadian political podcast thing ever.
So based on the NHL shop.ca prices available as of right now, he's wearing a $250 jersey and it's pristine. There's no mustard stains on it. Hasn't been through the dryer once or twice. And he's holding a discount American beer.
I don't think he's even opened the beer. I don't think the tabs pop, man. Yeah, okay, but to be fair, lots of people have just bought, Oilers jerseys because, of course, they've hit the playoffs. So like that, I can't. Yeah, it's kind of like I actually can't hold the New Jersey against Mark Carney.
I don't hold it against him.
I think a lot of people. Oh, well.
I don't hold it against him.
I don't actually think I don't think Mark Carney's actually okay. It's in Congress, and I also would like to point out I don't actually think Mark Carney is a real hockey fan. Can I just point that out? I understand that I'm courting controversy. I'm calling bullshit. I'm not a real hockey fan. I don't care.
He is a hockey fan.
He is, in fact. I don't know. I have my questions. I have my doubts. Like I'm not a real hockey fan. It's okay to be a Canadian and not a real hockey fan. That's all right. I don't know. He just seems like the kind of guy who was into Highlight or someone like that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm super into, polo. That should be that guy. And he should just lean into that. Lean into it.
No, when you kept like, I knew you weren't a real hockey fan when I realized you generically referred to every hockey team as Flames.
Correct. Yeah. It's just my internal default. Like, you know what? Not every Canadian needs to be into hockey. It's okay. It's all right. Not every Canadian politician needs to be into hockey. It's okay to be into polo or Highlight or shuffleboard or curling or whatever. And I really wish that more Canadian politicians would just lean into the high diversity of interests in sports that Canadians are allowed to exhibit.
So you and I missed an opportunity years ago and we laughed about it after, but remember when Chrystia Freeland made a big point of canceling the Disney Plus? So you and I only realized after that using the Line's email account and her parliamentary email account, we should have gifted her a year of Disney Plus.
That would have been funny. Maybe we should send Mark Carney some more, a Stains jersey so that he fits in more.
I was thinking better beer.
You're telling me?
No, I want to send him good beer.
Better beer. Should we? Okay, let's send him some good beer. All right, on that note, I mean, the reason why we're talking about this for real is because obviously this does indicate or adds more fuel to the rumors that Justin Trudeau will be going soon by hook or by crook.
Yeah.
You and I both, I think, remain of the persuasion that Justin Trudeau's personal ego and psychology make it really, really difficult for him to choose to leave of his own volition. However, there's just more data points starting to compile that he just can't effectively stay on. You and I are both hearing similar rumors, which is an interesting thing, that the latest is that he's going to step down or leave sort of early July, set up a leadership race for, say, a spring election. I think it is increasingly likely that a spring election is on the horizon. I still remain doubtful that Justin Trudeau is going to go of his own volition. I think that still the only way he actually pulls the parachute cord on this is if he's pushed out by his caucus. And I still just am not seeing a caucus that will do it. So I remain doubtful that he's going to actually leave. But hey, man, could be wrong.
So one of the topics that if we were not in the middle of a tech meltdown with you being unable to connect except via like liberated cell phone, you would have seen earlier in the week Chrystia Freeland's really weird statement. The one about gated communities and pregnant teens and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, the really weird one.
So we didn't talk about it in the podcast because I'm keeping my powder dry on that one for a column that I'm going to write for us next week. But you are right. I am hearing rumors that Trudeau is going to leave much earlier than expected. I still don't believe those rumors. I would still bet longer rather than shorter on his remaining tenure. But if the rumors are true, maybe, I don't know if it's causal or coincidental, but think of some of the stuff we've been talking about the Liberals doing in just the recent weeks. A couple podcasts ago, like Mark Holland, like your road trip caused the atmosphere to spontaneously combust, and bail reform means the end of gay marriage. And then Freeland this week saying, if we don't tweak the capital gains inclusion rate, the living will envy the dead. And I don't think they can keep this going 18 months like this. And I happen to know, and I'm not going to comment more on this for reasons you understand. I happen to be aware of the next wave of opinion polling that's coming out. I know that the Liberals have had some cause for optimism this week. There's been some polls maybe suggesting things were turning around. I am aware of a poll that's going to come out that's really bad news for them. And I just think to myself, they've got a by-election coming up where there's no good outcome for them, because either they lose a safe Liberal seat and that's bad, or they barely hold on to a safe Liberal seat and that's also bad, or they keep it, but people are wondering, why did you almost lose it? And that's also bad. Ministers are losing their minds and saying really stupid shit like but Chrystia Freeland's own logic, we have to raise capital gains to prevent teen pregnancy. Every tax credit knocks up a teen. It doesn't make sense. They're flailing. And if we do have a spring election, maybe that's a good thing, because I don't know how the hell we do this for 16 more months.
Okay, so the flip side of all this and the counter side of all of this is we've been hearing rumors that Justin Trudeau just couldn't possibly stay on in the light of these polling numbers, and his caucus was going to kick him out any minute now, and how in the world can he stay on? We've been hearing rumors about this for literally a year now.
Yeah.
He hasn't heeded them. And I don't think as I said, the inner psychological turmoil that drives him to do what he does has fundamentally shifted in his head. Another bad poll number, I don't think is going to change that. We have been told by multiple sort of rumored sources to keep an eye on what's happening in St. Paul's. There's a by-election happening right there. If the Liberals lose or even come close to losing St. Paul's, the rumor is that their federal caucus will go into full revolt and essentially just be like, play him off, Charlie. And, this is the cat meme with the piano is kind of what I'm picturing right now. But that being said, so like I can't rule that out. And you just can't rule out that the combination of silly season, absurdity, total chaos, lack of message discipline, poor polling numbers, and maybe a bad by-election result, Trudeau finally gets the hint and takes the bow. And that's why we're starting to see, Carney start to build himself up with these weird beer photo stuff and stuff. You can't rule it out, But on the flip side to all of this, like I said, I don't think any of the fundamentals have changed for them. I do think that they are at the end of silly. We are in silly season, so we know that everybody kind of starts to come unglued around June, right before Parliament lets out. You know, you'll head into barbecue and summer season. That'll give people a chance to rest and reset. Rest and reset. Touch your third eye. That will reset your nervous system. You know, and they only need very minimally promising polling numbers for their inner cowardice to collectively kick in and just say, you know what, just stay the course. We're just going through a rough bump right now. So, man, I don't know. Like I said, I don't think that Trudeau's going to go unless the external pressure on him to go is so overwhelming that he effectively doesn't have a choice. And I still don't see that pressure coming from within the Liberal caucus, because I think the Liberal caucus just doesn't have enough internal gumption to do it. Now, that being said, I do think there's a pretty good chance that we're looking at a spring election. That timing looks right. And for exactly the reason that you've just said, the train is so radically off the rails and has now been for so long that I just don't think that they can sustain the current course with a parliament laid out the way it is for another year and a half, right? I just don't think that's plausible. But I do think they're going to try and hold off until after they see if Trump wins the next election, because I still think they think their best bet is to try and tar the conservative movement as being, you know, Canadian Trump light.
I've been nodding you can't see me obviously, but I've been nodding very seriously the whole time you've been saying that. But to be honest, all I'm thinking about is what beer I'd like to send Mark Carney.
You know, on that note, it started to rain here, so I think there's a non-zero chance that the roof will go next. So I think we got to put a pin in it there, guys.
Next week's podcast will be me at home in my usual home broadcasting studio, and Jen adrift in the middle of an ocean, attempting to flag down passing boats by waving the tattered remains of her clothes.
Canada is broken. Trying to do a Morse code Morse code that I'm hoping will some AI will turn into like text to speech that will then be broadcast through the Line podcast. Thank you very much for joining us.
Mirror
we really do
to like
appreciate
reflect sunlight.
Little mirror. Yep. We'll figure something out.
This is our dedication to bringing you, the Line podcast listeners and viewers, every week's episode. We are that determined to do it. And that is why we ask you, as always, please like and subscribe. Today's podcast was brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Now is the time to modernize Canadian laws so that adult smokers have information and access to better alternatives. By doing so, we can create lasting change. Learn more at Unsmoke.ca.